Chapter 2. Nala. A sense of excitement saturated the air as the pride readied itself for this much-anticipated celebration of its youth. Crisscrossed gazelle horns marked the two spots where the opposing teams were to gather, but for now the 6 cubs participating in tonight's game stood in a wide circle in the shadow of Pride Rock. Dusk had just settled over the land. The melodious calls of the crickets, cicadas, and grasshoppers ringing through the clearing as the insects ventured out. The full moon shone bright in the sky, illuminating the members of their pride assembled for the evening. 4 of the 12 fully grown lionesses that made up their pride had been dispatched to the southern edge of the Pride Lands, where a pack of wild hogs had been seen earlier in the day. They would be doing the real hunting tonight. At one time, the lionesses could hunt every 3 or 4 days and provide enough food for them all to subsist on. But ever since the hyenas had moved onto their lands, at their new king's invitation, no less, lionesses were forced to hunt every single night to keep up with the hyenas' ravenous appetites. It was yet another reason why this year's hunting games felt so intense. They needed hunters now more than ever, and it was why Nala already felt like a failure to her pride. Her stomach roiled as she waited for the ceremony to begin. She shivered despite the warmth of the breeze that blew across the Pride Lands. She looked up at the sky, towards the cluster of stars she had deemed Simba's. Just before he perished, her friend had told her about a conversation he'd had with Mufasa about how the kings of the past looked down on them from the stars. Nala had spent so many nights staring up at the sky over these past 6 months, willing herself to feel something. All she needed was a sign, some indication that Simba was up there, that he was looking out for her, cheering for her. If there was ever a time she needed a sign that her friend had her back, it was tonight. But it would take more than wishing on stars to save her from utter humiliation. It would take a miracle. Stop that, Nala mentally chastised. She was probably putting too much pressure on herself. No one expected her to be perfect. Perfection wasn't expected of any of the cubs. Tonight's kill, if they were lucky enough to make one, would provide sustenance, but the pride was not counting on the cubs' skills for survival. At least not yet. They all waited for Sarabi to make her grand entrance, as was tradition. Even though her life mate no longer ruled as king, no one disputed that Sarabi remained the queen of their kingdom. All the lionesses deferred to her. Nala's breath caught in her throat as she watched Simba's mother make her way to them, her regal head held high. The lionesses and cubs all bowed as she marched towards them with measured steps, her journey ending in the center of the circle. Welcome to the time-honored tradition of the hunting games, Sarabi began. She slowly walked around the circle, staring each cub in the eye. Our pride has ruled this kingdom for generations, in large part thanks to our skilled lionesses. There is no equal in all the savannah. Tonight, the newest class of hunters will display what they have learned. Or not learned. Disaster, disaster, disaster. The word rattled around in Nala's head like a tumbleweed blowing across the dusty savannah. You have been preparing for this since shortly after your birth, and the preparation will continue long after this night has passed. But you have reached a point where it is time to assess where you stand in your tutelage. Sarabi stepped to the side. Thandi will now explain the rules of tonight's games. The lioness, who Nala learned had participated in the games during the same season her own mother had, entered the circle and began to lay out instructions for tonight's activities. Cubs will be randomly selected to join one of 2 teams, Thandi said. Randomly selected? Nala was so relieved that she would be spared the embarrassment of having to stand here while her fellow cubs picked everyone but her to be on their team that she could have cried. And yet, it turned out that it was just as humiliating to be randomly placed on teams as it would have been if the Cubs had picked themselves. Her name was the fifth called, and her two teammates, Bondu and the always quiet Puleng, who was even younger than Nala, both groaned when Nala was ordered to stand with them in front of the gazelle horns. Her heart sank even further into the pit of her stomach when she glanced over and caught the look shared between Lindiwe's and Kahina's mothers. The two lionesses seemed to be quietly celebrating the fact that their daughters had not been saddled with Serafina's disappointing cub. Ola, Lindiwe, and Kahina now stood across from them with matching grins as they already knew they would be crowned victors. Nala sent a silent prayer up to the ancestors, asking to be instantly blessed with hunting skills so that she could wipe the smug look off their competitors' faces. "Don't mess this up," Bondu hissed at Nala. She wanted to tell her that she wouldn't, but the likelihood that she would make a spectacular fool of herself in front of everyone was much too high. "I'll try not to," Nala answered. "I'm sorry." It wasn't their fault she was not prepared for tonight. It wasn't her fault either. She looked to her mother, who smiled and nodded. Nala could not summon a return smile. It took all she had within her not to lash out. This was her mother's doing. She was the one who refused to let Nala practice her hunting with the other cubs. She was the one who quickly snatched Nala back whenever she got too far away from her side. Ever since Simba's death, her mother had become obsessed with keeping Nala safe. She panicked if she went too long without putting her eyes on Nala, and when it came to Nala's doing anything she seemed dangerous, which these days was as simple as Nala's going to the waterhole with fellow cubs, Serafina was quick to shoot it down. She was so afraid of something happening to Nala that she treated her as if she were a brand new baby cub, born hours ago. And tonight Nala would be made to suffer the consequences of her mother's irrational fear. Thandi stepped back so that Sarabi, moved to the middle of the two teams, could reclaim her spot. "The time has come for our junior cubs to make us proud," Sarabi said. "Let the hunting games begin." Bondu and Buleng darted for the brush that was just west of the waterhole, where small fowl and rodents tended to live, while the other team went in the opposite direction towards the embankment where Nala and Kamari had hidden during their game of Tag You're It. "Come on, Nala, follow close behind," Pulong called in a loud whisper. "Remember, don't make a sound." She was making a sound. She was making many sounds, and it wasn't as if she needed Puleng's instructions. She may not have had much practice in hunting, but she knew the basics. "I know that," Nala answered. "Shh," Bantu chastised. She wanted to point out that Puleng had made way more noise than she had, but all she would gain from that was another rebuke. Instead, Nala concentrated on listening for prey. She closed her eyes and slowed her breaths. Some things were taught, but others were instinctual, like that sense you got when you weren't alone. She couldn't explain it. She could only feel it. Nala heard the faint sound of rustling reeds near the edge of the water. Something was there. A gazelle? An antelope? How amazing would it be if she captured an antelope? She glanced over at her teammates. They were looking in the opposite direction. This was her chance. If she was going to prove to her fellow cubs that she was not a total loser, this was the time to do it. Nala called on the memories of the pouncing lessons she'd had with Simba, staying low and stalking her prey in a slow, calculated manner. Carefully, she crept towards the water, doing her best to keep her tail motionless. One swish could send the grass rustling and her potential catch scurrying. She peered through the reeds and spotted a tiny bat-eared fox. It was no antelope, but it would count as a kill. She took 3 delicate steps forwards. Then, with a burst of speed, she took off for the fox. She pounced on it, But before she could clamp down on its neck, it shrugged loose of her grip and took off. Nala! She whipped around to find Puleng and Pontu approaching. How did you let that fox get away? Puleng asked. I tried to catch it, Nala complained. She motioned to the cub's empty paws. At least I had something in my sights. What did either of you catch? Shh, Puleng said, dipping low. Nala glanced around quickly before dropping to the ground. She watched as Puleng glided through the weeds. Before Nala could spot what she hunted, the cub shot forwards and in seconds came back with the same fox that had escaped from Nala's grasp. Puleng dropped its lifeless body on the ground in front of Nala and said, This is what I caught. And we could have had a warthog if you hadn't made so much noise trying to catch this little baby fox, Pontu said. We were going to double team him, but now he's run off. The first lesson in hunting is to not scare off the prey, Puleng said. You're useless, Pontu told her. Nala wanted to argue, but how could she blame them for being upset? She would be upset too if she were in their position. The other cubs had worked hard preparing for this night, and she was letting them down. I'm sorry, was all she could say. Yeah, you are, Pontu said. She rolled her eyes. Let's go further west. Maybe we could spot a baby wildebeest that's fallen behind in the migration. Nala hesitated. Her mother would have a fit if she traveled much further from Pride Rock. Just south of the waterhole was the farthest she had journeyed in 6 months. If she couldn't see the tip of Pride Rock, she knew she had gone too far. But tonight's circumstances were different. There was no way her mother expected her to stay within her usual boundaries during the hunting games. Nala, come on, Puleng called from several paces ahead of her. Nala looked back over her shoulder before sprinting to catch up with her team. They had just passed the thick baobab tree that marked where the grasslands met the scrubland when Nala heard her name being called, or more accurately, shrieked. Not again. What is that? Puleng answered. Nala! Nala, answer me now! She heard her mother yell. Serafina, she is fine. Let her be, a second voice called. It sounded like Sefu, another of the lionesses. It's the hunting games, for goodness sake. I don't care. Nala! Puleng and Pontu both stared at her with furious scowls. Nala was too mortified to speak. She stood frozen, her limbs rigid with embarrassment. Nala! Her mother's cries sounded desperate. We're over here, Pontu called out, her eyes still trained on Nala. I'm sorry, Nala whispered past the lump of humiliation lodged in her throat. You're such a baby, Puleng spat. I knew this would happen if you were on our team. Serafina arrived, followed quickly by Sefu. There you are, thank goodness, her mother said. She wrapped her paws around Nala and gave her head a deep lick. Then she reared back and in a stern voice said, You know better than to wander this far. What were you thinking? I wasn't wandering, Nala argued, and it's not as if I was alone. I have my team with me. You're all cubs, Serafina said. What if a cougar or hyenas or a lion from another pride came around? Do you think you and your team would be able to fend them off? Serafina, you know there are lionesses stationed throughout the Pride Lands tonight, Sefu said. No harm is going to come to any of the cubs. You don't know that, her mother said. We take special precautions during the hunting games. You know this. I don't care. I'm pulling Nala out of the games. She could participate next time. Mom, no, Nala said. My decision is final, her mother said. Follow me back to Pride Rock. A feeling of hopelessness washed over her. If her mother refused to allow her to participate in something as important to their pride as the hunting games, when would Serafina ever loosen this grip she had on her? Nala lowered her head. With a heavy sigh, she began walking behind her mother. So what does this mean for the games? Nala heard Bantu ask. I don't know, Sefu answered. It isn't fair to have a team with just 2 members. I shall ask Sarabi what she wants to do about the continuation of the games. Several other lionesses met Nala and Seraphina when they were still distant from Pride Rock. They questioned what had happened, but Seraphina refused to answer them. When Sarabi asked upon their return, Seraphina simply said that Nala was not suited for the games this year. Everyone knew that well before the start of tonight's ceremony. Why had her mother allowed her to participate at all? If she had told her no from the beginning, then she would have at least spared Nala the embarrassment of being chased down like a baby cub who had wandered too far from home. Sefu, Bantu, and Puleng arrived shortly after Nala and her mother had returned, and Sefu provided the explanation that everyone sought. Nala caught the frustrated glance Sarabi directed at Seraphina, but her mother's attention was on something in the distance. Nala looked in the direction she was staring, and her stomach plummeted as she saw the other team dragging a black and white striped carcass towards Pride Rock. "A zebra! They captured a zebra!" cheered Fayola, Ola, and Abina's mother. Bantu and Puleng both stared Nala down with matching infuriated looks, while a group of lionesses raced out to help the other team haul in their kill. Ola, Lidewe, and Kahina were showed with praise as the pride celebrated their victory. This had turned out to be even worse than Nala had first imagined, and she had imagined it would be pretty awful. She slipped away just outside the circle of lionesses. She could not stomach seeing the success of the other team, knowing that she was the reason her own hadn't achieved the same. Nala lay on her stomach and rested her chin on her paws, even though she had been in the same position on the ground looking in, wishing she could be part of the group. Countless times since Simba left her, she had never felt so disconnected from her own pride as she did in that very moment, disconnected and alone. Nala scrambled up from the ground and narrowed her eyes as she tracked Ola and Kahina sauntering towards her. Congratulations, she told them. They were, after all, the victors. "Thanks," Ola said. "So, what did your team kill?" Nala swallowed. "Puleng killed a fox." "One fox? That's all? Not even an aardvark? Even Abina can catch an aardvark." "No aardvarks, only the fox," Bantu said as she stepped up to them. "Her mommy made her come back to the Pride Rock before we even got to the scrubland. All of us had to come back because of her." Ola and Kahina burst out laughing. "I am so glad you weren't on our team," Ola said. She hugged and stared down her nose at Nala. "You thought you were such hot stuff back when you got to spend all day playing with the future king. Now look at you." Nala flinched at her words. "She was only friends with Simba because Sarabi and Seraphina are best friends," Kahina said. "That's not true," Nala whispered. Every horrible thing they said felt like sharp claws lashing her cheek. "Yes, it is," Ola said. "Face it, Nala. Without Simba, you're nothing around here." Nala felt the tears welling in her eyes, but refused to let them fall while the other cubs were around. She needed to get away before she made an even bigger fool of herself. And there was only one place she wanted to be right now. Only one place she could be. She pushed past Ola and the others and raced to Pride Rock.